In your own words, who are you, Tony? What mission are you on?
This is kind of crazy. Are you ready for this? I still remember your speech from 1992. What? 30-something years ago? They remember my talk. My career was like a flow of water. It went where it needed to go. And I used that book as a business card. So I didn't have a business card. I had the book. The Platinum Rule is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. That is a philosophy that I teach everybody else. Every dark cloud, if you look closely enough, has a silver lining.
This season, I was gifted an opportunity to talk with incredible people. Tony Alessandra started his life in the projects of New York City, and in the next 70 years, he became the absolute legend of public speaking. He's the author of 36 books and world's #1 communication guru, and just an amazing person to chat with. As always, I picked Tony's brain on professional related topics like assessment, DISC, etc. But then we talked a lot about him, his life, his lifestyle, to inspire you, dear listeners, and of course for me to learn and get inspired. So here is my conversation with Tony Alessandra. Thank you and enjoy the episode. In your own words, who are you, Tony? What mission are you on?
Well, I went through college, got my PhD in marketing, and became a professional speaker. But my passion was the assessment business. I've been involved in the assessment business since 1974. So even as I was a speaker, that was something that I really focused on. Through 1996, all the assessments were paper-based, and then we went online in 96 and actually created a business, a dashboard, et cetera, in 2000. So my passion is to significantly improve the way people communicate so that they can more effectively connect with other people. That's been my whole mission in business life.
That's a good mission, Tony. Why did you become passionate about the assessment industry in the first place?
Well, when I was in my PhD program, I was going through my dissertation, the final part of it. And I think it was sort of the fourth quarter of 1974. I was invited to this private little workshop in somebody's home. And that's where they presented for the first time the 4 styles. It was more the Merrill Reed model, which was social styles, the driver, analytical, amiable, and expressive. And when I saw that, I said, this is it. I mean, this is really what I want to do. So I went back to my chairman of my dissertation committee and asked him if I can change my dissertation to do around psychometrics as opposed to demographics or psychographics. And he said, no, finish your dissertation. It's already been, the proposal's been accepted. And when you get out of here, when you finish your PhD, then you can focus on the 4 styles. But it was something that really connected with me. I don't know what it was, but it was love at first sight. That's all I can tell you.
Back then, assessment in general is something that a lot of people were doing, or a lot of businesses were doing. Just comparing to what is right now with regards to how popular it is. What was that like? Back then when you start in the niche.
I was a college prof back in 1972, 73 at Cal State University in Fullerton, California. And one of my students came up to me and showed me the results of an assessment that he had taken. And what it did is it showed you what you would be best at doing, what occupations. And so anyway, I looked at it and I said, this is great. I mean, it's incredible. And he said, faculty could take this for free. So I ran down to the whatever it was. I don't know if it was the assessment center or the counseling center, probably the counseling center. And I took it and I got my results back, several days later. And I looked at it, and it had a whole list of things that I would be good at in their order of importance. So number 3 on the list was marketing and merchandising, which, that's my background. Number 2 was sales. Amen. But number 1, I looked at number 1 and I said, this is absolutely ridiculous. It's wrong. And I filed it away. That was in 1973, early 73. Let's fast forward now. In 79, I left academia, and I had been a college prof. Even as I was going through my PhD program, they gave me an instructorship so I can teach while I was getting my PhD. So I had 8.5 years of university teaching under my belt. But in 1979, January of 79, I decided to leave academics, become a full-time professional speaker. I immediately achieved success, and in 1985 was inducted into the National Speakers Association Speakers Hall of Fame. So that's 1985. My career was skyrocketing. In the early 90s, I don't remember when it was, I got this Xerox scanner. And I said to myself, I'm going to take all of my paperwork. Now, this is, back in the early 90s. I was sort of ahead of digitizing things, compared to what was going on in the business world. And I was going to my file cabinets. Remember how we used to file everything in our file cabinets? And I would take one folder at a time. I'd put the paper in the scanner and scan it, and then digitize it, and then shred the paper. And I went through all my stuff. But as I was doing this, I came across that test. And I looked at it and I said, oh my God, this is incredible. Because remember, number 3 said I was great at marketing and merchandising. Right. Number 2 said I was great at sales. But number 1, which in early 73, I said, this is ridiculous. Number 1 was public speaking.
Wow.
But at the time in 73, early 73, it wasn't even in my frame of reference. And I became it, not even realizing it from that test. I think it was called the Strong Vocational Test. And, maybe deep down, having taken that assessment and having it so accurately predict what I would be doing and what I was good at, maybe that, sat deep down in me about the impact of assessments. But, back in the early 70s, when I started getting involved, it was relatively new. Not only were assessments new, but what I was teaching, that 4-style model, the 4 behavioral styles, it was like you would see the audience. It was like a whole new discovery. They would be, whoa, this answers a lot of questions about how I come across the people and how my family is and how my work colleagues are. It really was quite new. Of course, today, we fast forward to today, and the DISC assessment, very, very widely known. When I go out and talk about DISC, I have to I added something into my speeches, acknowledging that everybody knows what I'm going to be talking about. And I typically say, today I'm going to share with you a concept I know all of you have been exposed to at least once. So that acknowledges they know what I'm talking about, what I'm going to be talking about. And then I say, but how many of you, second or third time through a book or a movie, hear or see things that you totally missed the first or second time through? And everybody raises their hands. And I say, the same thing's going to happen today. I don't care how many times you've been exposed to this concept, you're going to hear and see some new twists that you can apply in your life to more effectively connect with other people. So.
It's interesting. We we talk about assessment. You build a business, it's a career. You're a professional speaker. You wrote 32 books. So how this all is connected, or like, is this like one career of, Tony Alessandra, or these are the three different career paths that you were just kind of developing and pursuing at the same time? Because like I understand each one of those concepts or each one of the professions, as the writer, as the assessment professional, running the business, as the professional speaker, but so many different people would pursue each one of those individually and not all of them at the same time. So explain to me how this all works together.
All right. So if we look at careers, I was for 8.5 years a university prof. One of the things that they always told you when you were a university prof is publish or perish. And of course, I changed it to publish and flourish instead of perish.
Right.
So that sort of got me into the activity of researching and writing. All right. But that wasn't my main thing. My next career, which I said started in January of 79, actually full time in January of 79. It actually started part time while I was still a prof, because some of my students who may have also held a job asked me to come speak at their company or their trade association. But the second career was a professional speaker. And I looked out that in January of 79, when I first cut out to be a professional speaker, my first book was published, and it was called Non-Manipulative Selling. And I used that book as a business card. So I didn't have a business card. I had the book. So in the book was my calling card, my credibility. I'm a published author. I'm a PhD. But I also look pretty young, so I had to grow, like you, I had to grow a mustache and a beard and, to make me look a little older. Yeah, I won't talk about it anymore. So that was my second career. But remember that during that career, in my first career, I started doing part-time speaking, which led into full-time speaking. And while I was speaking, so we're talking about 1979, and actually last year, 2022, is when I decided I gave my last live speech. All along the way, I was doing assessments. And really in the year 2000 is when I decided I'm going to build the assessment business as a whole separate business rather than just part of my speaking business. And I hired a programmer and a support person and really started building that business. And my goal was in 2000, as I built the assessment business, I will cut back in my speaking. So as the assessment business grew financially, my speaking business, I started cutting back until I stopped in 2022, simply because the assessment business has become so big. I now have, there's 17 employees. And I just, there's another reason I really didn't want to go out and speak anymore. We can talk about that when you're ready.
Just for everyone who's listening to this, when, we talk about assessments, what do we mean? What is the terminology for assessment?
Well, an assessment, here's how I define it. So there's tests that have right and wrong. Assessments that we talk about do not. That they're just looking at a picture of the current situation. I describe assessments as an MRI, the medical MRI, an MRI of the mind. That's what an assessment is. So there's no right or wrong. It's just, where are you at? How do you communicate with others? Not right or wrong, just an assessment.
Mm-hmm. Then tell me, why should businesses care about assessments?
Well, because assessments give you insight into how your people communicate, how they do what they do, why they do what they do, what their emotional intelligence might be, what their decision-making capabilities are. Assessments measure all that. And so you can use assessments, and this is how businesses use them. They use assessments for individual personal development. So when they have a team of people in their company take the assessment, they could look at the results and say, okay, Michael, here are the areas that you are strong in. Here are the areas that you can improve. Tony, here's the areas, et cetera, et cetera. So first is personal development. Second is team building. All right, how can Tony and Michael, who work together every day, how can they create a 1 and 1 equaling 3 as opposed to 1 and 1 equaling 0, that we just don't communicate, we butt heads, why are you behaving the way you are? So it's for team building. It's for leadership development. It tells leaders how to manage, motivate, counsel, correct, delegate to people based on their style. And also a big area today is companies are using assessments, not just necessarily one assessment, sometimes a battery of assessments to evaluate candidates to see how well they fit the job that they're being considered for.
Now, obviously businesses have different KPIs or metrics that they're measuring their, success for, right? Are there any immediate metrics that assessment can provide value for, that I can kind of measure them, and then I would say, okay, this process or this new implementation will provide me this X ROI?
Yeah. So here's one, for example. We did a study of car dealerships in the southeast of the United States. And one of the problems they were having is high turnover and a low amount of revenue per month per sales rep. So they asked us to look at those salespeople within the dealership. And actually, it was a series of dealerships. So we had a lot of salespeople. And there were many salespeople who were struggling, not doing well. They had high turnover, but there were some salespeople who had good longevity on the job and high profitability in sales. So we looked at those salespeople to create a profile of what does that salesperson, the really successful salesperson, look like. And then we created what's called a benchmark. We had them take the assessments. It was a series of 2 or 3 assessments. And we benchmarked the candidates against that top group. We hired those salespeople, those candidates who matched our top salespeople, and found that their time on the job was longer and their average sales were higher. So that's a KPI. A KPI could be turnover of employees or sales. It could be average sales per employee. Another KPI could be leadership development. So with leadership development, one of the things we can do is we give them what's called a leadership 360 assessment. So we have certain number of competencies that we want our top leaders to excel at. We typically measure 8, it could be more than 8, it could be 12 competencies, whatever, but it could be decision-making, communication skills, delegation ability, whatever. And so the current leaders, or hopefully maybe the supervisors that we want to promote to a true leader, they take the assessment as they believe they behave in all of these different competencies. And then they send it out to their immediate manager, to their peers, their equals, and to their direct reports. And it gives you an idea of, again, where they're strong and where they're weak. And it allows us to develop training and coaching for those leaders who need development in certain areas.
You mentioned like a key metric as an example, right? Should I, as a business, be ready before doing any type of implementation of assessment in my organization with a certain specific goal in mind, or I can discover those as we go? So would you say that, generally speaking, right? Clients that you work with and potentially those that you've seen most of the success with, do they actually approach you with a certain metric that they wanted to increase or measure with regards to assessment, or they just really are looking for whatever help anyone can provide them to help to build the business?
The main ones that we're almost always asked again are, how do we increase our sales? And how do we reduce our turnover? And how do we hire the right people for the jobs that we need them to perform? Those are typically what happens. When a group takes the DISC assessment, we can give them a wheel, and it shows where each of the people are on the DISC, D being dominance, I being influence, S being steadiness, and C being conscientiousness. And it tells a company where they have maybe too many in one area or too few in another area. I remember that early in my speaking career, I had employees. I hired the employees, and they were all high I's, which was a problem because things, as we say, fell through the cracks. People weren't doing certain things. Everybody got along. Everybody had a great time.
Yeah.
But certain things were not getting done. So, it's important to understand what the mix of your business is. Now, I was a very small business, but medium-sized businesses that may have 10, 20, 50 employees, it's great to see where we're at and see if there's any gaps we need to fill.
Mm-hmm. We've done a DISC assessment with our leadership a few years ago, and something interesting that we've discovered was that all our leaders in our organization, except one, were very dominant I's, right? Like very dominant I's, very influential, always go, 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 motivating, very bright, very extroverts, right? And under crisis situation, when there is a stress, our I stays the same, but our D factor goes up very high across the board. Everyone was doing like a lot of D, a lot of S, like a lot of those, so just going up. And why I mentioned except one is that, so essentially what did it tell us? That in a crisis situation, although we are very influential, we always go back to rules, to processes, to discipline, and it's very natural for all of us. And one of our leaders was not. He was actually opposite to that, and his I wasn't going down. He didn't do D. So in a way, when there was a crisis situation and every leader within the same organization were just go, go, go and knew what had to be done, one person felt from the crowd, and eventually we let that person go because it hasn't been. Last few years hadn't been very, easy for any business out there, right? So having, the leadership that matches that sort of like style of doing things together is very important. So it's just, something that we didn't realize, but then when we saw that, we were like, oh, wow, that actually makes sense. It's so natural for us to behave in that fashion, right? We talk about DISC, right? Why I, and of course you know about DISC, and why do you think it's so popular and so widely used?
I think whether it's DISC or any other assessment, people love to get a look inside themselves. They like to see what they're like. That's why a lot of magazines have these little quizzes in them, and people, they'll buy the magazine just to take the quiz. Am I a good father? Am I a good lover? Am I charismatic? So people love to see what they're like, maybe even how other people see them that might be different than how they see themselves. So I think it's just a human nature to to get a peek inside to see, or as we would say with the Wizard of Oz, to get a peek behind the curtain.
What are the key mistakes that people make implementing DISC, for example? Besides not actually then making the change, or or creating a process and just doing that and putting that in the folder and then under the table, right? But generally, are there any other mistakes that you've seen your clients wanted to made, or some companies made, and the assessment wasn't implemented?
I think it would be important if a company or a group was going to take the DISC assessment, that they're clear about what they want to get out of it. Are we taking it for team building? Are we taking it for individual leadership or sales development? I think it really is important to have a clear understanding of what your primary goal will be for taking the assessment. Now, there are other goals that can happen, but you really should have one. It should, I don't know if we should just say, hey, let's all take the DISC assessment and have a good time. Oh, you're a D, you're an I, because then it just becomes a game. These assessments are incredibly valuable if they're used appropriately, and especially if they are validated.
Something as important as assessment to individual professional development, as for me, Michael, as a sales or a service person, etc., right? Because it's so important to me personally, because it can allow me to grow professionally, right? I can develop more skills. I can be more critical about where I am, what I can work on, right? Because it's so important to me personally, should it go, or the initiative or implementing regular assessment of myself, should it be more, more proactively done or talked about from me, or it should be the leaders or my managers or the company who can ensure that I have those regular prevention? Because what's happening, and I've seen that very often, assessments in the organizations are being implemented by, as you said, like leadership or a company because they wanted to increase certain metrics, right? But as we just talked, it's not necessarily about the company or about the business. It's about the individual who wants to grow, right? So if you were to kind of, I wanted just to hear your thoughts on whose responsibility should the implementation of assessment should go for, the company or the employee?
Well, I think initially, or primarily, not initially, but primarily it should be the company, because the company first of all, can afford it probably more than an individual.
Right.
And it shows the individuals within the company that I value you, and I'm trying to improve your skills to make you a more effective employee and individual. Now, if the company is unwilling to pay for it, which may typically happen, especially in smaller companies, then I really, it is something that an individual should pay for. It's like continuing education. It's continuing improvement. That's crucial.
Because very often when people say, hey, well, I spend 5 or 10% of my salary on education, they mean always courses or books or trainings, but they don't talk about assessments, right? Especially in the early days of the career, right? When it's so important to know all your ins and outs and just know what you need to be focusing on and being very, precise about that. It's interesting. It's, I've just seen that, I think that doing or talking about assessment is as if you take personal control of your life and of your career, and it shows that you're interested in developing a long-term successful career and not just kind of doing the work, right? And I think that it's not necessarily about who is paying, but who starts the talk, right? So I think that if, for example, my team would start talking more about, hey, Michael, we've done this last year. Maybe it's not on your agenda right now because you have some other priorities, right? So like I am as a leader, I want to change a metric, like increase my sales revenue. I've talked to you, Tony, we've done assessments, then you follow up, we've implemented that. But then maybe next year my priorities changed, right? But I still have the same sales team. So if my sales team would approach me and say, hey, Michael, we've done this assessment last year, can you do it one more time? Right? But people don't do that, right? They don't want to take control of their career early in the day. They just go with the flow, right?
Well, it depends on the individual, but I think that a lot of companies today use external coaches, professional coaches, business coaches, and in many situations, I think it's the coach's responsibility to set the expectation early on. Hey, we're going to take the assessment. Here's why. Here's what it will do for the company and the individuals in the company. But it is a process. It's not a one-time process. It's something that we should do on a yearly basis and really set those expectations in the mind or minds of the leaders that they're talking to.
Guys, Tony and I have a present for you. We appreciate your support and the time you spent listening to our conversation. So to provide you with additional value, Tony had shared for free his DISC virtual training program and his ebook on the platinum rule for DISC sales mastery. Whoa. Anyhow, you can access all the links from the description section below. Now, back to the podcast. So you mentioned this already. So last year, 2022, you've done your last professional speech.
Right.
Why did you decide to move on?
Well, I really am burned out by the travel. It's a lot of travel. I averaged for many, many, many years, probably over 30 years, 100 plus paid speeches a year all over the world. So on American Airlines, I have 12.5 million frequent flyer miles, just way too much. And so I burned that on the travel. That's number one. Number two, I live in San Diego, California, which arguably may have the best weather, certainly in the United States, if not the world. Where much of the world right now is under severe heat issue. Yeah. We are today, our high is going to be 75, which for us is warm. So it's great weather. Another reason is I wanted to spend more time at home with my wife and my kids. Now my kids are grown, but all 4 of the kids live here in San Diego. But another big reason, I want to retire while I'm still on top. And also, obviously, when I don't need the money to speak, where I have to go out and speak. So I've already accomplished the financial aspect of it, where I don't ever have to speak. But I wanted to make sure that I quit when I was on top. I did not want people saying, oh, yeah, Tony Alessandra, I remember when he was really good. No, I didn't want that to happen. So last year, I gave a speech. It was a 90-minute speech. It was in Las Vegas. It was 500 people. And I got a standing ovation. And I said, that is my mic drop. That is it. I was just waiting for the what I thought was, arguably the perfect speech at that part of my career. I'm sure I did better speeches when I was younger, but this one hit all the right notes. And I said, I'm going out now. I want people to be saying, oh my God, why is he quitting? He's so good. No. And I have been asked to speak, this year.
Of course.
No, not going to do it anymore.
Going back to that moment, if we sit on this, you remember what was the feeling? What were thoughts on your head? What was that? The moment you done the speech, you have, people applauding you, standing. What were the thoughts in your head? If you remember, of course.
Well, I obviously was really happy that the speech went well because I wasn't feeling well. Believe me, I was not. So I put out a little harder, adrenaline. I was really great, to see you don't always get a standing ovation, no matter how good you may be. You don't always get a standing ovation. This was a great standing ovation. I walked off, made sure that I as we say, schmoozed. You know what that means? I schmoozed, talked with the crowd and just left in a really good feeling. And I didn't say to myself at the time that was going to be my last talk.
Oh, right. Okay.
I
So
had
you
to let
didn't
it
know.
sink in. And, maybe now's the time. Maybe that was the talk. So, yeah.
After 30 years, hundreds of speeches a year, right? So it's in thousands of professional speeches, right? Are you satisfied with how your career went?
Definitely. Yeah. I did what I needed to do, got great reviews, had a lot of people over the years either write me or call me. I still to this day have people in contact with me, whether it is through like LinkedIn or some online or an email or whatever, or sometimes even a phone call. Somehow they get my phone number and basically say, you know what, you had such an impact on my life. I still remember your speech from 1992. What? 30 something years ago, they remember my talk. So, yeah, I'm pleased with the way it went. It went much better than I thought. Remember, when I got that strong vocational assessment and it said I'd be a great public speaker, I never thought anything about that. And even when I started out, I didn't know where I would be and how good I might be. But there was some coaching along the way that really, and not organized coaching, speech coaching, but one of the best tips I ever got was early in my career, early 80s, where one of the real top-notch pros in the business came up to me and said, you know what, Tony, I've seen you speak and you come across or try to come across as very professional, polished, professorial, and off stage, that's not you. Off stage, you're playful, you're funny, you're telling stories, you're a New York City Italian. You don't let any of that come out when you're on stage. You need to let it come out. You need to let the authentic you come out in your talks. And so when I heard that, at first I thought I needed to be a speaker like the real polished professional speakers.
Right.
But being a great speaker doesn't mean you don't put your hands in your pocket. You don't say, what was I, no, it's being yourself. And when I started allowing, it wasn't overnight, but it was over a period of months, little by little, I allowed more of me to come out, more of my playfulness, more of my little stories, more of my whatever.
Right.
My career just skyrocketed from there.
Now, my next question won't be about necessarily professional speaking, just generally about your career. Have you always had a vision to where you're going? What's the plan? What you want to make up for yourself?
My career was like a flow of water. It went where it needed to go. I never said I'm going to be a professor. Never crossed my mind, ever. Until I graduated with my MBA, and the counselor at the University of Connecticut said, you probably would be good at this. And to become a speaker never was in my frame of reference, but being a professor, now I'm in front of people teaching them, and it was moving from college students to business people. And then the assessment business, it wasn't something that I necessarily said I'm going to build a business, around assessments. No, it was part of what I did as a speaker. But all of a sudden, this vision came to me. I kind of went where I thought I should be at that point in time. I didn't have specific goals that said 10 years from now I'm going to create an assessment business. 10 years from now I'm going to be a professional speaker. Never. In fact, I thought I was going to be a salesperson because I worked my way through college selling.
They say that you should have a plan or a certain vision, that you need to know where you're going to be able to control, your destiny, or, obviously not destiny, but you got the gist, right? So just making sure that it's a clear sort of like plan to where you're going to. Now, you said that you had a flow. Do you think that it made you more opportunistic, more happy in the moment, more present, taking whatever opportunity you have and just moving on that? Or you think that it doesn't matter that you didn't have the plan, you still need to have a plan most of the time? You were just lucky without it.
Yeah, I was lucky without it. I do believe people should have a plan, but the plan should not be a box. This is where I would like to go. But, things change. You change. Opportunities come up. So, you have to be willing. If this is my plan and these are the parameters, I have to be willing to stretch them or drop one area and see where life takes me.
Have you ever thought of your legacy?
I don't think about it a lot, but I certainly have been asked it. You're not the first person who has asked me that question. So yeah, I've thought about it, and what would I like to be remembered for? So I think number one, my generosity, not just financially, but my willingness to help other people, no matter what. And I always was out there helping people. Even growing up in the New York City, New Jersey area, I got in a lot of fights, fist fights. And many of those fights were when I saw somebody being picked on by either a bigger person or a bully or whatever, I would get involved to help that person. Today, certainly having money, I'm able to do that also financially. My wife and I have endowed a scholarship at the University of Notre Dame, which is where I graduated, for students who get accepted to Notre Dame, but cannot afford it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
thank you.
But it goes way beyond that too. If friends need help, I'm there to help them. But yeah, so number one would be my generosity, in terms of a legacy. I would say likability, ability to get along with just about anybody, even some of the people that I'm friendly with and I'm helpful with. Sometimes my wife and some of my friends say, "I cannot believe that you're friends with that person," and so I say, you know what? I understand where there are problem areas, but there also are some good points in that individual. And I tend to focus more on those good points and not dwell on the negative ones. So generosity, likability, and I know there has to be something about my work, whether it's my speeches and how I've touched people or my books. In fact, I was looking yesterday, somebody asked me, how many books have you published? And I said, you know what, let me look. And I looked yesterday and it was 36 books. And most of the books, again, are either business-oriented, sales-oriented, personal development, communication skills. So a legacy is, Tony, through his ideas, his help, his generosity, has made me a better person. That's it.
Do you have any professional regrets?
Professional regrets. Well, I wish I had gotten into speaking sooner. That would have upped my career, and learned about the assessments and the four styles sooner. But you know, I really don't have many regrets at all. I really don't. I've actually, and many people have said this to me. They said that I'm extremely lucky. Now, again, some people say it's not luck. That I'm just in the right place at the right time. Who knows?
It's karma.
Karma. Right? One of my guiding principles in life is what goes around comes around, and I really, really believe that I don't help people to get something from that individual. I help people just out of my desire to help people. I like to be a helpful person. And I think that the karma comes back to me in other ways, totally different ways. So I really do. And I do think that I really have an incredible amount of luck. And maybe it's not luck. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's karma. Who knows what? But yeah, it's just been a very lucky person.
Can you, I'm just, you were answering about the legacy, about the regrets. And I was thinking, can you also share with me, what do you appreciate yourself for? Are there any specific things that you mentioned what your friends and your family appreciate you for, right? But any other thing that you kind of appreciate, yourself for?
I would say my desire for constant self-improvement. And that was drilled into me early in my life by my mother, who always told me to go the extra inch. Most people say go the extra mile. My mother said go the extra inch. And what she meant was that in every aspect of my life, whether it was social, mental, physical, spiritual, we can go on and on, but to always get every day just a little bit better. Every day, she would say, Anthony, learn a new word. Every day, do an extra push-up or sit-up. Every day, give somebody, an extra compliment. Just a little bit, constant self-improvement, which also prompted me to read a lot of self-improvement books when I was young. The Magic of Thinking Big, Psycho-Cybernetics, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I read all of those self-help books. So I think it really is this desire, and it's been there my entire life, to always do a little bit better. And it doesn't matter. I always look at, okay, so this is where I'm at right now, and I'm really successful. How can I be a little bit better? That's it.
Did you have a singular moment in your life, that you consider to be like a aha moment that made you who you are right now?
Yeah, I'm sure I've had more than one. But, and this is kind of crazy. Are you ready for this? So when I was somewhere between 6 and 9 years old, we lived in the projects in New York City. And the projects were high-rise, low-income buildings in New York City.
Right.
And where we lived, there were 4 buildings in a square. Okay. And in between the buildings was a little sort of park and playground for kids. And one day, I don't know all the details because it was a long time ago. I got into my first fight ever. And the kid who I was fighting with beat me up. So I went upstairs. I think we were on the 5th floor of the high rise. My father happened to be home. He was a New York City cab driver. And I was crying, and my father said, what happened? I said, this kid, bigger kid beat me up. And my father said, you need to go back down there to survive in the city like this. You need to go back down there. You need to fight that kid again, and you need to win. No, I don't want to. He just, and my father said, you either go down there and fight the kid again, or you face me. And it was convincing enough that I went back down into the little area, saw that kid, challenged him, beat him up. And days later, the kid came back with somebody else who was better than him, and I had to fight that kid. And what happened, this was something, if I had to pick one thing that I was the best at in my life, even to today, it was street fighting. And it started there. And why do I feel it was so crucial in my development? It was because a lot of people knew how good I was at street fighting. And you know how you get peer pressure when you're young? Hey, try this,
Right.
do this, do this. Yeah. And they would, sort of tease you and embarrass you into doing what you really didn't or shouldn't have done. Nobody ever did that with me.
You didn't have that, right?
I never
Yes.
had that. And that's why, as I mentioned before, when I saw people getting picked on, I would go into the fight and I would fight the bully. And that's how I was known. And sometimes people would get into these issues knowing that I don't have to worry about it because Tony is going to get me out of it by helping or fighting. But I really thought that aspect of my life created a level of self-esteem and self-importance. I don't know how to describe it, but it was something that really helped me in life. The way I carried myself, the way people perceived me. So anyway, I think that was a major turning point. There were others in my life. That was probably, in my opinion, probably the most significant. Another, I would say, much later in life, significant turning point was my second marriage to my wife, Sue. This year will be 33 years. And it was the way that she dealt with me and accepted me for who I was. And in my first marriage, whenever my first wife would ask me to do something, I would say no. There would be an argument. Sue, on the other hand, when I would say no, she would say, no problem, Tony. Why don't you sleep on it? And if you feel the same way tomorrow, that's fine. Never argued, but by allowing me to kind of step back and let it percolate in my mind, probably 80% or more of the times, the next day I would say, okay. So it was just a whole different way of dealing with me. It was a good mesh of personalities instead of a clash.
Did you have a lot of stress back in the day? Maybe not as much stress right now in San Diego with the very good weather, like spending time with family. But did you have a lot of stress back in the day in your professional, personal life?
Yeah, the only stress that I really have experienced in life was financial stress. And I think part of it, and you have to understand this now, okay? Early in life, we lived in the projects. My father was a cab driver. My mother did not work. We did not have money. So there was that, always seeing how my parents struggled and wondering if I would struggle too. And I was always good with money, handling money, saving money, investing money. But even when I became a millionaire even earning $1 million in a year as a speaker, I still wondered, would it all go away tomorrow? And I remember going to this psychologist. This was when my first wife and I were getting divorced. We were going together to this psychologist. And we discussed this apprehension about, will it all go away financially? And she said, well, what would happen if it all went away tomorrow? What would you do? And at the time I was a professional speaker. And she said, what would you do? And I said, geez, I don't know. She said, could you be a salesperson? I said, yeah, I could be a salesperson. And would you do well? Probably. Could you go back to university teaching? Yeah. Would you do well? Probably. She said, so even if you lost everything as a professional speaker, there are other things you can always fall back on that you would be good at. I would say money and finances, even to this day, because I don't worry about it anymore, typically for me, but I worry about it for my kids and my sister, and my goddaughter. So I do worry about it for them, and I'm actually doing things over the next. I've already done things, but over the next 2 or 3 years, I have something in place that will happen that will ensure their financial future.
But I just wanted to clarify for people listening to this, you still stick to assessment until this day. So it's been like 25 years, right? You've done professional public speaking for over 30 years. You've done hundreds. You always stick to what you're doing, right? And doing that consistently, right? You published 36 books, right? So I think that for people listening to this, opportunistic doesn't mean that you need to take every opportunity and then change your career, change your life, do things, a few years I'm doing sales, then a few years I'm doing marketing, and then a few years I'm doing customer service, and then I'm moving and doing something else. And you're not being consistent. You're not building up your name. You're not building up your career in one direction, right? So I was saying that, yes, you need to be opportunistic, but you need to be opportunistic in your lane, in your niche, and always stick to the basics and just being very consistent in that, right? Because one of my mistakes that I've done in my early days, I work for this industry, it's like academic paper writing services, and and then I've moved to working in analytics, and now I'm in marketing. So I've spent almost 4 or 5 years of my early days, jumping between professions, not being able to, build up my network, right? And not focusing on that, but just chasing the higher salary, chasing the better conditions for myself without actually thinking on, hey, what could I be in 4 years, right? Like just sticking to what I was doing. And now, being in appointment setting and marketing for over like 8 years now, things are just start happening more and more and more every year after this. And they just start stacking up, right? More opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So it just kind of, again, you mentioned opportunities. I'm all for it. And I'm like you, and I have a team that is very opportunistic, but we're always trying to stick to our guns, right?
Yeah. I think it's crucial that you do that. I think you need to say, okay, what am I good at and what do I enjoy? Because sometimes you're good at something, but it's not necessarily what you enjoy. And really constant, again, I've said this probably 6 times at least in this podcast, but constant self-improvement, constant education. And if you look at my life and my career, it was, okay, I read all these books. I'm constantly trying to improve myself. Education has been key to me. I went all the way through, got my PhD. Okay, so now I have a PhD. I'm successful in business. What do I do now? I do more and more difficult crossword puzzles. And let me tell you something. I have found crossword puzzles to be an incredibly significant educational experience for me. It has really broadened my knowledge base. It's made me think more creatively, especially if you can get your hands on the New York Times. I wouldn't start on the New York Times crossword puzzle. I'd start on easy puzzles until you get good at those, and then maybe get to the Monday New York Times. But here's what's interesting about the New York Times, and I'm going to get to this whole reason why it really is great. So the Monday New York Times is the easiest because whatever the clue is, it's just a single thing. It's exactly what it's asking. But as the days go on, and especially Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Saturday's the most difficult. The clues they give you, you have to open your mind to think about, well, does it mean this, or this? It has very different, you have to broaden the way you're looking at the problem. So what it's allowed me to do is to look at problems this way rather than this way. So it really has been an incredible growth experience for me, because I only started doing crossword puzzles in 2005. I was in my 50s. So I wish I had. Now there's a regret. I wish I had started that when I was in college or even when I graduated, because it has been such an incredible experience for me. And it helps, especially when you get to my age, keeping you sharp, in terms of Alzheimer's and dementia and stuff like that. But again, it's not just doing one thing and getting really good at it. It's also stretching yourself into totally new areas. Learn a language if you've never done it before. Read more books. But again, constantly improving yourself. That has been my theme in my life.
You mentioned the languages. This is exactly what myself and my close friends are doing. We're improving ourselves and just kind of stretching the brain, always learning new, but doing that through languages and learning different languages, and then culture through those languages, right? And just experiencing and broadening your view. It helps a lot to just quicker the mind, but also just always stay sharp on and learning things faster, right? You went through several recessions in your 44 years, for sure, right, of a professional career. Are we in one now?
Or the recessions?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on where you live. They say that the European Union is in a mild recession. They say that the United States is not.
Let's talk United States.
Yeah,
we're not in the recession in the States?
No, not according to most economists. No, we're not doing great, but we're above water, so to speak. Our heads above water.
So it's just a certain like a downturn or something, right? So we were growing and we are not growing at the same speed as we've been growing before.
Right.
So that's what you're saying.
That's exactly
But then
right.
like professionally in your business, talking with your friends, have they experienced any kind of decline or kind of a signs of recession, or in their industry, in your industry, all good, all the same, metrics are the same?
Well, again, I have most of my friends are in the speaking business. And if you talk to them, they're in a recession simply because the entire live professional speaking business has changed so dramatically since let's say the 90s or even the early 2000s. And part of it was the Great Recession back in 2007-8. But more than likely, it's because of COVID, and where so many businesses, because of COVID, had to learn how to do meetings that were not live. And here we are communicating as if we were face to face. I feel like we're just about face to face. So there are so many new and exceptionally good technologies today that you can do without meeting live. And that's why a lot of meetings, when I'm back in the 80s and 90s, a full speaking calendar was 100 to 120 speeches a year. Today, according to my speaker buddies, a full calendar is 24 to 36 speeches. So it's dropped dramatically. But other than that, when I'm looking at, other businesses and people that I know that are not in the speaking business, business is not as good as it was, let's say, last year, but it's not bad. It's just not growing like it grew before.
You mentioned that you still work with some key clients and, you're in sales even until this day. So you guys are doing okay. So there's no decline in terms of your metrics, like business as usual, right? So.
Yeah, we're doing great. I would say over the last 9+ years, which includes 2020.
Right.
Okay. We have grown 34% a year on average, 34% a year. I'm seeing a little bit of softness right now this year. We're not quite at 34%. But when you look at it, even the last 2 days, we've had enough business come in the last 2 days that made me start saying, wow, maybe we will hit 34%.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Things start picking up.
So I'm optimistic. I think things are going to pick up. Of course, here in the United States, we don't know who our next president's going to be, and that is a cause of concern. What will that do to our growth and to our world standing?
All right. So to close up, Tony, was there anything or something that I didn't ask, or something that we didn't talk about that our listeners worth knowing from, within the topics or frames of the topics that we've talked today?
I would say, let me close with a couple of sayings that I have for myself and my family and my friends. The first thing we didn't even mention was probably what I'm best known for, which is the platinum rule. And the platinum rule is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. Basically, treat people the way they like and want to be treated. So that is a philosophy that I live by. That is a philosophy that I teach everybody else. Again, getting back to my goal of effective communication. Another one is, what goes around comes around. That's a pretty famous saying. What goes around comes around. And again, it gets back to what you mentioned before, karma. Okay?
Yeah.
And again, whenever something goes wrong, and that's not to say, I said I'm incredibly lucky. I don't have really stress or regrets in my life. But that doesn't mean that everything goes well every single day. And when something goes wrong, my saying to myself is, this too shall pass. And it always does. So I don't stress out about things. If something goes wrong, one of the things I say to one of my kids, because one of my kids worries about everything. And, so there was something, there looks like there's a leak on the ceiling. Oh my God, the ceiling's going to, fall down. What is it going to cause? Hey, wait, step back. Don't fret about this until you know exactly what's going on. And by the way, they found out exactly what was going on, and it was a little bubble of paint that had separated from the ceiling, and you didn't need a new ceiling. All you had to do was fix that, repaint the ceiling, and that was it. So, again, this too shall pass. Every dark cloud, if you look closely enough, has a silver lining. Just like I mentioned early on, some of the people that I'm friends with and that I communicate with may have a lot of dark clouds, a lot of negative traits, but I look for that one silver lining. What is the one thing that I really like about this person? So, try not to take things too seriously. This too shall pass. be kind to other people. What goes around comes around. Don't just be kind to people because of what you might get out of it from them. And try to really understand what makes people tick so that you can adapt and adjust your behavior to improve the communication process so the two of you can get along better. That's it.
Let's hold this thought and let's close up on it. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Michael.
I really appreciate it, Tony, and I appreciate the time you gave me. And thank you so much for a lot of knowledge bombs that I received today, and for me getting inspired. So
thank you.